A few days ago, we told you how the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, had spoken about alleged human rights violations in India. The same United States that tried to lecture New Delhi on Russian oil imports, the same America has done it yet again. This time, its President Joe Biden has made a statement on India, which sounds like a big question mark on India's democratic credentials. On Gravitas tonight, we decode Joe Biden's statement and take a closer look at how India should view his unsolicited advice. Tonight, I want to start the show with these words by Henry Kissinger. He once said, "It may be dangerous to be America's enemy, but to be America's friend is fatal." And there's a reason for that. U.S. foreign policy is extremely self-centered. Allies change, enemies change, only one thing remains constant, that's America's preaching nature. And on Friday, we saw another example of this. United States President Joe Biden was attending a fundraiser in Seattle. It was more of a private event. Few journalists, fewer cameras. It was all about Biden detailing his vision, his policies for the United States. And as expected, the conversation veered to Russia's war in Ukraine. And this is where it gets interesting. Biden does not see Putin's war as a purely strategic battle. He sees it as an ideological battle, autocracy versus democracy. In this battle, Biden has identified two camps. On one side, China and Russia, the autocrats. On the other, the alliance of democracies. I know it sounds great, but Joe Biden had a caveat. Listen closely to what he said. I'm quoting. The point being that one of the things that the autocrats fear the most, and India has its own problems, all those countries have their own problems, is the notion that somehow we can work together in concert and contrary to what are essentially dictatorships. Now, what problems is he talking about? That Biden did not explain. But let me break down the statement for you. Joe Biden feels that Indian democracy is imperfect, that Indian democracy has its own problems. Now, just to be clear, nobody asked Joe Biden to judge India's democracy. Nobody asked him to troubleshoot Indian politics, but the American president did it anyway. India is the largest democracy in the world, the only core nation that borders China, the only core nation facing direct Chinese aggression. Yet, Joe Biden is busy criticizing India, and this raises an important question. Does the US see India as a natural strategic partner, or does it see India as a convenient friend, sort of like a tool to contain China? America's recent track record does not inspire confidence. In Syria, they abandoned the Kurds. In Afghanistan, they abandoned the Ashraf Ghani government. In Ukraine, they are cheering from the sidelines. Like I said, self-centered and volatile. Even their oldest ally, France, was not spared. I'm, of course, talking about the AUKUS fiasco. America snatched away a submarine deal that was committed to France. What's worse, Paris was not even informed. Now, what does all of this indicate? Reliability issues. Partners who bet on US support are regretting it. The question is, will India be an exception? Frankly, it's hard to say. Do you remember this month's 2+2 dialogue between India and America? The Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, decided to talk about India's human rights record. He said that he was tracking so-called concerning reports from India. Again, this was unsolicited. India did not ask for an assessment, yet Blinken decided to give one anyway. And now you have the American president using the same language. He is talking about quote-unquote problems with Indian democracy. Well, what about American democracy? Last year, there was an insurrection at the US Capitol. America's Congress was vandalized. Millions of Americans still believe that the 2020 election was rigged. Gun violence is uncontrolled. Systemic racism is everywhere. What does Joe Biden have to say about any of that? Listen to how he described the United States in his address to the Congress last year.
America is an idea, the most unique idea in history. We are created, all of us, equal. It's who we are. And we cannot walk away from that principle and, in fact, say we're dealing with the American idea.
The most unique idea in history. How convenient. Every other democracy is flawed or is dealing with its own problems, but not America. This habit of preaching is very old in the US. On religious freedoms, on human rights, the US consistently judges other countries. And at the same time, they give out a clean sheet to themselves. Now, this is not how partnerships are built. Partners trust each other to manage their own house. They do not preach. And if Joe Biden is serious about building a partnership with India, he must realize this. If not, he will be playing into China's hands. During the Cold War, Kissinger's words were true. Allies, rivals, everyone had a target on their back. 30 years later, Washington must make a choice. Does it want to be the trustworthy friend or the class monitor that no one likes? And for the moment, we are turning to Pakistan. It has received a new warning. It's not from the IMF or the World Bank or the FATF for that matter. This warning has come from the Taliban, the same Taliban that Pakistan trains fighters for, the same Taliban Pakistan provides safe haven to, and the same Taliban that Pakistan said had mended its ways. And guess what it's telling Islamabad now? The exact same thing. Mend your ways. This is Mullah Muhammad Yaqub, the acting defense minister of Afghanistan. He has warned Pakistan that his country will not tolerate invasions from its neighbor. What sort of invasions? Airstrikes by Pakistan security forces. Let me explain this. On the 16th of April, reports emerged that Pakistan's Air Force had raided parts of eastern Afghanistan. Why? Apparently to strike camps of the Tehreek-e-Taliban, an offshoot of the Afghan Taliban that functions primarily in Pakistan but has camps located on either sides of the Durand Line. And this is where the strikes unfolded, the Kunar and Khost provinces of Afghanistan. Islamabad said the strikes targeted TTP terrorists. Afghanistan said they targeted innocent civilians. It claims that 41 people were killed in the strikes, mainly women and children. Zabiullah Mujahid, the Taliban spokesperson, had said at that time that the airstrikes were, and I'm quoting, a cruelty that would pave way for enmity between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Islamabad should know that if a war starts, it will not be in the interest of any side. This was last week. This week, another warning has been issued, this time by the country's acting defense minister. He has said, and I'm quoting, "We are facing problems and challenges from both the world and our neighbors. The clear example is the invasion by them in our territory. We cannot tolerate the invasion. We have tolerated the attack. We tolerated that because of national interests. Next time, we might not tolerate it." So the Taliban has made itself clear. It has said what it wanted to. The question is, how is Pakistan perceiving this? Has it responded to the warning? Yes, it has. But its response raises more questions than answers. Pakistan's Foreign Office spokesperson has said, I'm quoting, "Pakistan and Afghanistan are brotherly countries. The governments and people of both countries regard terrorism as a serious threat. Therefore, it is important that our two countries engage in a meaningful manner in taking actions against terror groups on their soil." In other words, what Islamabad is saying is that the strikes will not stop, not until terror is wiped out on both sides. Now, here's the thing. A terror state is quarreling with the terror regime over the actions of a terror outfit they both helped feed. It could not get more bizarre than this. And what's more is that this is not the only point of friction between the two. For months now, they have been arguing over the Durand Line, this 2,700-kilometer-long border which separates Afghanistan and Pakistan. This border was drawn by the British, but it was rejected by the Afghans, primarily because it divided Pashtun communities. A historical headache that has resurfaced since the Taliban came to power. The Taliban have refused to endorse the Durand Line. They say there should be no borders among Muslims, especially not among the Pashtun community, which comprises Taliban's ranks. In December 2021, Pakistani forces tried to demarcate the border. They installed barbed wire fence along the Nangarhar province. The Taliban responded by tearing the fence down. And the same month, another clash was reported, this time in the southeastern Nimroz province. Pakistan tried to install barbed wire fences on the border. The Taliban retaliated by removing the fences. Pakistan says it is fencing the borders to stop the infiltration of terrorists. In 2021, it reported at least 294 terror attacks on its soil. These attacks killed at least 186 civilians and 192 troops of Pakistan's security forces. This was a 56% increase in terror attacks as compared to the previous year. Most of these attacks were attributed to the TTP, which reports say has been emboldened by Taliban's takeover in Afghanistan. The withdrawal of US troops has helped it even further. The TTP can now operate more freely without the fear of US airstrikes. Pakistan is trying to put an end to this. It's trying to fence its borders and strike TTP camps, but the Taliban is against both. It considers Pakistan's actions a violation of its sovereignty. This is something that security experts had long predicted. They had published studies on how differences will soon emerge between the Taliban and Pakistan. From the looks of it, the situation has gone way ahead of mere differences. It has taken the form of hostility. And what this basically means is that if Pakistan presses the Taliban's wrong nerve again, it will not hesitate in launching a strong retaliation. This story is still developing and we will be keeping a track. On to Sri Lanka now. What's happening there is no longer an economic crisis, it is a humanitarian one. The public anger is boiling over. Yesterday, thousands of Sri Lankan students took to the streets. They reached the Prime Minister's residence. This is what happened next. Yes, this is Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa's home. All these students had one demand. They want the Rajapaksas to go. But Prime Minister Rajapaksa has dismissed that idea. He wants to brazen it out. I have his statement with me. This is what Rajapaksa told a radio station in Sri Lanka. What use of interim governments when people with varying policies cannot see eye to eye? There has to be accord, which is not possible. If there is a need for an interim government, it should happen only under my leadership. It should happen only under my leadership. The Sri Lankans have clearly lost confidence in the government. That's why they want the Rajapaksas to go. But Mahinda Rajapaksa says he will not step down, neither will his brother, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. But do they have a plan for Sri Lanka's recovery? Severe shortages of fuel, food and medicine continue. Food inflation is at 25%. Diesel prices have spiked by over 100%. Many Sri Lankans are facing a crisis of survival. Colombo is at the mercy of the International Monetary Fund. It needs a bailout to keep its economy going. One creditor is trying to make the most of Sri Lanka's misery, and that is China. Colombo owes over $8 billion to Beijing. So far, China has refused to grant any debt relief, no restructuring of loans either. Turns out Beijing has some conditions. Last week, a key meeting took place. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa spoke to the Chinese Premier Li Keqiang. Reportedly, the leaders discussed Chinese aid to Sri Lanka. Beijing seemed willing, but it had a demand. It wants a free trade agreement first. Here is what Li Keqiang told Mahinda Rajapaksa. He said China had empathy for Sri Lanka, but there ought to be an early start of the negotiation and signing of the free trade agreement so as to enhance mutually beneficial cooperation. Did Sri Lanka concede? It seems like it. A statement came out after the leaders had spoken. It said Sri Lanka is willing to promote talks on a free trade agreement. Sri Lanka is struggling at the moment. It needs aid to survive. But all China can think of is a trade deal. It wants to squeeze Sri Lanka out of every penny and make the most of the crisis. Sri Lanka is in a desperate situation. It has no option but to fulfill every Chinese demand because it needs money. One loan from the IMF will not be enough. It needs to borrow from a range of creditors to balance the books. One of them is China. Colombo wants to borrow $1 billion from Beijing just to make outstanding Chinese payments. A loan to repay a loan. This is what a Chinese debt trap looks like, and Colombo is caught in one. Separately, Sri Lanka also needs a credit line of $1.5 billion. This is to purchase essentials. China's policy is extremely clear. As long as you agree with us and comply with our demands, the loans and assistance will keep flowing. Effectively, Beijing is trying to dictate the future of Sri Lanka's economy. Reportedly, China first wanted Sri Lanka to not go to the IMF. It offered an alternative: take more Chinese loans instead. India is calling out China. The Finance Minister, Nirmala Sitharaman, made a statement. She said China must be treated as an equal creditor while restructuring Sri Lanka's debt. Sitharaman told this to the IMF and the World Bank. She met with their representatives last week. India has been trying to help Sri Lanka out with the bailouts. Beijing is still trying to influence the outcome. The Chinese envoy in Colombo met the press today. He said this about restructuring Sri Lanka's Chinese debt. The debt restructuring definitely will have an impact on future bilateral loans. Back in Beijing, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs is avoiding questions from the press. A spokesperson was asked about Sri Lanka and whether Beijing was rethinking its pledges of financial help. China did not reaffirm its commitment. Beijing just said, "We will try to do our best." If China continues to have the same attitude, it will not just hurt the Sri Lankan economy. With its moves, Beijing could destabilize Sri Lanka. Perhaps the Communist Party should look within. The Wuhan virus is turning Chinese citizens against the Chinese leadership. In recent weeks, clips showing their outrage have gone viral. There is a massive public outcry against zero COVID. How is Beijing responding? By caging the people inside their own homes. Take a look.
The people of Shanghai are being caged. Streets are being closed off. Entrances to many housing blocks are being sealed. Without any warning, green fences like this one have come up. Even if a single case is found, the entire block is fenced and sealed off. Those inside cannot step out. It doesn't matter if they've tested negative. Everyone must stay inside. These extreme measures have only made the residents more angry. One of them responded by screaming at the local authorities. Others are taking matters into their own hands. They are dismantling the fences. Shanghai is reeling under hard quarantines. Those who are suffering the most are the patients. They are being punished for falling ill. Kumi Wu is one of the victims. She had tested positive earlier this month. Just like every patient in China, Kumi was moved into quarantine. She was first taken to a transit site. There, she was forced to use beds and blankets used by other patients. Soon, Kumi was moved to another site. That's when the horror began.
The second transit facility made me feel like I was in prison. Everyone had a bed with a number when we got there, and then you have to register, admissions, and so on. It is temporary housing built of many cargo containers in a large open space. 1 to 3 people can stay in a room. There are separate sinks, shower heads, and toilets inside. But when you get there, the people in hazmat suits will tell you that no one is allowed to leave the room from now on. So I didn't leave the room for 24 hours, and I didn't even open the door, because once you open it, someone would immediately make us go back inside and close the door.
Thousands like Kumi have suffered in Shanghai. Thanks to China's zero-COVID approach, Beijing has tried to scrub off the criticism online. But there has been a tsunami of outrage. A 6-minute-long video is now going viral. It describes the many horrors the people of Shanghai had to endure.
4点多钟就来了，到现在都几点了？这个菜是不是要全部烂掉？水也没得喝。上海有小卖铺有没有？吃没得吃。我是来支援的。
我也需要上面有好的政策来给我，我可以对居民有交代。现实是没有，知道吧？没有，那个工作让我身心疲累。
为了谁呀？我自己也有家呀，你们有家带不住，我是有家不能回呀。
These audio clips are unverified, but Chinese censors have been busy. They have been trying to erase it from the Chinese internet. Taming public criticism is now necessary for China. The Wuhan virus is spreading. Dozens of cases have been detected in the capital city of Beijing. More than 3 million citizens will be subjected to mass tests. There is panic. Residents have begun hoarding food and supplies. They fear a Shanghai-style lockdown could be ordered in Beijing.
Let's now turn to France, where Emmanuel Macron has won France's presidential election. He ran against the far-right candidate Marine Le Pen and managed to get re-elected with over 58% votes. It's an outright victory, and it is history. Why do I say that? Because 1, no French president has managed to be re-elected since 20 years. And 2, because Macron's 17-point margin against Le Pen is noteworthy. So what worked in Macron's favor? Perhaps his handling of the Wuhan virus and successfully bringing the French economy back on track after the numerous waves. In the run-up to the election, Macron promised stability, and he is calling his victory a mandate for a quote-unquote more independent France and a stronger Europe.
Today you have chosen a humanist project, ambitious for the independence of our country, for our Europe, a republican project in its values, a social and ecological project, a project based on work and its creation, a project of liberation from our cultural, academic and entrepreneurial forces. This new era will not be the continuity of the 5 years before, but the collective invention of a revised method for 5 better years at the service of our country, of our youth.
Au service de notre pays.
Macron is promising to be a president for all. So what will the next 5 years look like for France? What will be the biggest challenges? And what does Macron's victory mean for India? Let's discuss over the next few minutes. Let's start with the road ahead first. Above all, it will be a continuity of the last 5 years. Come June, France will vote in the parliamentary election. Experts expect Macron's party to win. Experts also predict no major policy change under Macron 2.0. Now, is this a good thing or bad? The election results hint at a divided France. In 2017, just about 37% of the voters had voted for the far right or the far left. This year, that number has climbed to 43.97%, meaning nearly 44% of France does not agree with Macron's policies. There is a long list of issues they want addressed, be it rising cost of living or inflation, law and order or immigration. How will Macron address them all? Of course, there will be some minor policy changes. For example, Macron wants to make social benefits more accessible. He wants to reform the pension system, make workers work longer as well. Macron has also promised big on climate, be it a greener farming industry or 6 new generation nuclear power plants. Will all of this be enough to tackle the possibility of a Yellow West 2.0 fueled by the growing social divide? Avoiding one is Macron's biggest challenge. The next question, what will his presidency mean for Europe? Definitely good news. It's a critical moment for Europe. Ukraine is at war. The continent is in the midst of a crisis not seen since the Second World War. And what's worse, Germany's Angela Merkel is no longer in office. And Britain has exited the bloc, leaving France to take on the role of a de facto leader. Macron wore the robes of the role when he went to the Kremlin in February to try and stop the war with Ukraine. He failed. But his electoral victory had given the European Union more than enough reasons to rejoice. Macron, you see, is a dedicated European. He wants to build a stronger bloc, one with greater cooperation between the members. He wants to ensure Europe's strategic autonomy. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz called Macron's victory a vote of confidence in Europe. The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson congratulated Macron, calling France, quote-unquote, one of our closest and most important allies. So that was Europe. What does Macron's second term mean for India? A deepening India-France strategic partnership, as put by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. India and France share a close political and defense partnership. The two countries have vowed to act jointly in the Indo-Pacific. France is also expected to play a key role in helping India manufacture air-independent propulsion submarines. Prime Minister Modi will soon be travelling to Europe. He will be meeting Macron and Scholz. Macron is someone that Prime Minister Modi calls a friend. And like they say, it's never a bad idea to have a friend in office. And the special India-Europe relationship was on display today as well. The European Union chief Ursula von der Leyen was in New Delhi. She met with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. She also inaugurated the 7th edition of the Raisina Dialogue. Von der Leyen's visit focused on 3 things primarily: trade, technology and security. The EU and India agreed to establish a Trade and Technology Council. Just to give you some context, Brussels has established this framework with only one other country, the United States. As for India, this is New Delhi's first Trade and Technology Council. And this tells you how important the announcement is. Also on the agenda was military cooperation, defense purchases, and coordination in the Indo-Pacific.
For the Indo-Pacific region, it is as important as for Europe that borders are respected and that spheres of influence are rejected. We want a positive vision for a peaceful and prosperous Indo-Pacific region. All at once, China is a negotiating partner, an economic competitor, and a systemic rival. We will continue our multifaceted engagement. We will continue to cooperate on tackling common challenges, and we will protect our essential interests and promote our values.
Politics has always been a boys' club. Lawmakers, prime ministers, presidents, in most countries, men have monopolized these jobs. But what happens when women break through, when they reach the heights of power? The same men unleash a wave of sexism. Let me tell you what's happening in Britain. The Daily Mail published this article on Sunday. Have a look at the headline. Tories accuse Angela Rayner of basic instinct ploy to distract Boris. I know you have many questions. Let me take them one by one. Who is Angela Rayner? She is the deputy leader of the Labour Party, basically number 2 in the opposition. Next, what exactly is the basic instinct ploy? Let me give you the television-friendly explanation. Basic Instinct was a film released in 1992. It starred Sharon Stone and Michael Douglas. This article is referring to one scene from that movie. In that scene, Sharon Stone distracts the police officers interrogating her. That is the basic instinct ploy. And that is what the Conservative lawmakers are talking about. They are accusing the Deputy Labour leader of distracting the Prime Minister. Let me tell you their exact words. She knows she cannot compete with Boris's Oxford Union debating training, but she has other skills which he lacks. She has admitted as much when enjoying drinks with us on the Commons terrace. British politics at its finest. For the record, these Tory lawmakers refuse to reveal themselves. They are making these sexist allegations in secrecy, but Angela Rayner has hit back at them. This is what she tweeted. Women in politics face sexism and misogyny every day. And I'm no different. Boris Johnson's cheerleaders have resorted to spreading desperate, perverted smears in their doomed attempts to save his skin. Quote unquote. Publicly, everyone is condemning these statements, even Boris Johnson. Here's what he said on Twitter. As much as I disagree with Angela Rayner on almost every political issue, I respect her as a parliamentarian and deplore the misogyny directed at her anonymously today. But is that enough? These condemnations do not change the basic reality of British politics. It's still a boys' club. Women do make it to the top, but they are targeted with all kinds of prejudice and sexism. And by the way, it's not just British politicians. Their tabloids are no better. Have a look at this Daily Mail magazine from 2017. The same outlet that published this article. Have a look at the headline. Never mind Brexit. Who won Lexit? On the cover were two of the most powerful women in Britain, then Prime Minister Theresa May and Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon. Just think about it. May and Sturgeon were discussing a post-Brexit future. We are talking about high-stakes stuff. And all that the Daily Mail could manage was this, Lexit. This sexism is an inherent part of British politics. Let me give you another example. This is from 2019 during the general elections. Jo Swinson was leading the Liberal Democrats. A fifth of all Google searches about her focused on her body, not her policies, not her campaign promises, her body. This is what most women face in British politics. Historically, the House of Commons has been a male monopoly. In 1918, the first female MP was elected. Since then, Britain has had 2 female prime ministers. Women now make up 34% of all lawmakers. So statistically, things have improved. But this controversy is proof of the root problem. And why just Britain? All over the world, women in public life face such accusations. Let me give you an example from last year. CNBC journalist Hadley Gamble interviewed Vladimir Putin. The next day, Russian state media went into overdrive. Look at their headlines. They accused Gamble of being a sex object sent to distract Vladimir Putin. These sexist outbursts are a desperate effort to protect the boys' club, to uphold the misogynistic status quo. Women are in public life to make a difference, not to distract male politicians. Such perverted claims only reaffirm the new reality. The boys' club is nearing its end. And speaking of boys' clubs, the Saudi royal family is undergoing changes. It has been for quite some time, though. But now some concrete evidence has emerged. A new report says that members of the Saudi royal family have been selling their assets worth millions. This includes real estate, yachts, artwork, jewels, a host of things. The royals are selling them all. And why? What for? There is no single reason. Some say they are selling assets to pay their bills. Others say it's because they want to hide their wealth. And yet others say they are doing this at the behest of the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. What is the truth? Our next report explores.
This is Prince Bandar bin Sultan Al Saud, a member of Saudi Arabia's royal family. For 22 years, he served as the kingdom's ambassador to the United States. And for more than 10 years, he was the Secretary General of the Saudi National Security Council. The Western press could call him a flamboyant spy chief who was at the center of Saudi power. But that was a long time ago. Today, Prince Bandar bin Sultan is a different person, a disciplined and defined royal, who is liquidating his assets for the benefit of the kingdom. In April 2021, he sold a $155 million country estate in the Cotswolds, west of London. And a few years back, he sold another $5.9 million property in Aspen, Colorado. What is the prince up to? He is apparently trying to be a loyal subject. You see, ever since Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's ascension to power, the purse strings of the ruling family's members have been tightened. The royals have been under pressure to sell their assets or cut down on their extravagantly lavish lifestyle to generate cash for Mohammed bin Salman's many missions. Prince Bandar bin Sultan is one among those royals. There are many more. Like the late Prince Turki bin Nasir Al Saud. He passed away in 2021. But shortly before his death, the prince sold a state-of-the-art home in Los Angeles' Beverly Park. The year before that, he sold a 203-foot luxury yacht. Next, we have Prince Khalid bin Sultan, the former Deputy Minister of Defense. In 2019, he sold a 220-foot-long super yacht. Then in 2020, he sold a Paris mansion next to the Eiffel Tower to the King of Morocco for $87 million. A new report says that together, Saudi princes have sold more than $600 million worth of their assets. $600 million! What has pushed the royals into doing this? There are two major reasons. 1. The royals are in need of cash to pay their bills. Up until now, the royal family would foot the bills, but MBS has curtailed access to state funds to the princes. He wants to utilize the money to fund his ambitious projects. The second reason is the fear of attracting too much attention. The royals are opting for cash in their pocket instead of visible wealth. They think their riches will make MBS regard them as potential rivals. They fear a rerun of the 2017 purge, when a host of influential royals were detained in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel under an anti-corruption drive. To put it simply, these royals are afraid of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. In just 5 years, the 36-year-old has strengthened his grip on power. He has detained his cousins and jailed Saudi dissidents. Naturally, the prince do not want to take any chances.
And Saudi royals are not the only ones selling homes. A very interesting property has recently been listed for sale. It is a tiny house located on an isolated island. There is nothing around the house, no shops, no roads, no construction. The nearest town is a boat ride away. And the only visitors are seals. Our next report takes you on a tour of the world's loneliest home.
Are you tired of the city life? Do you want to run away from all the chaos? Are you looking for a hideaway? We have the perfect house for you. This could be your home. Meet the world's loneliest house. It is located on an island near the coast of Maine in the United States. The house is built on 1.5 acres of land. The interiors include a bedroom, a small kitchen, a tiny porch, and that's it. The wooden house has no bathroom. When nature calls, one must run to the outhouse. All around the house is water, and inside it is a panoramic view of the ocean. No trees to obstruct the eye, no delivery agents to ring the bell during your afternoon siesta, no neighbors, and no traffic so your brain will not fry. Does this sound like your kind of home? Well, this property is up for grabs. The asking price is $339,000. That's around 2.5 crore rupees. The house was built in 2009. The only neighbors it has had since are seals. They visit often, the ad assures. How do you get to this no man's island? It's a boat ride away from the nearest town. The listing promises good anchorage and good landing points at any tide. In other words, it's 540 square foot of bliss or isolation, depending on whether you see this island half empty or half full.
Let's now tell you what else made news. Time for Gravitas Global Headlines.
Ukraine has said Russia has not agreed to its request for a humanitarian corridor after Moscow announced a ceasefire around the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol to allow civilian evacuation from the industrial area that is the last site of Ukrainian resistance in the port city. Israeli Defense Forces launched a retaliatory artillery fire after it alleged that a rocket was fired into northern Israeli territory by Lebanon. Almost 110 people were killed, vehicles burnt after an explosion at an illegal oil refinery in Nigeria's Imo state. 2 Russian oligarchs found dead along with their families within 24 hours under mysterious circumstances, according to reports. Investigators are probing all angles, including suicide and foul play. Twitter shares jump over 3% amid reports that the company will soon accept Elon Musk's takeover offer. Reports say discussions between the two camps are underway. A scuba diving boat carrying 2,000 gallons of diesel sank near the Santa Cruz Island in Ecuador's ecologically fragile Galapagos archipelago. The boat that had 4 members on deck has caused an oil spill in the region. Volunteers from Ecuadorian Navy, firefighters and local residents have started cleaning the area. Hundreds of women marched through downtown Mexico City to protest against the murder of an 18-year-old woman in the northern city of Monterrey. They demanded the Attorney General's office to conduct a proper investigation into the death. The governor of New Mexico signed emergency declarations as 20 wildfires continued to rage in 33 drought-stricken counties across the state. Max Verstappen and Elaine Thompson-Herah have won the top honors at the 2022 Laureus Sports Awards. Sportsman of the Year, Verstappen clinched his maiden Formula One title in 2021, while Sportswoman of the Year, Thompson-Herah, became the first woman to defend her 100-meter and 200-meter Olympic titles at the Tokyo Games. Barcelona suffered a third home defeat in a row for the first time in a single season with a shock La Liga loss to Rayo Vallecano. Barcelona's defeat leaves Real Madrid on the brink of the title, with Carlo Ancelotti's side needing 1 point from 5 games to become champions.
On that note, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas, leaving you as always with Gravitas images. Thanks very much for watching.
Let me know when you're really ready. You're ready?
Yeah.
I'm really ready. Go. Coming down in 3, 2, 1.